So how much of Pierre Poilievre is there without Jenni Byrne and vice versa?
The feminist in me has to raise that, I wonder if we'd be having the same conversation if she was James Byrne.
Fair.
Wow. We got a whole bunch of caucus politics here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got Mark Carney unable to secure a chief of staff. Nobody wants the job. We've also got Pierre Poilievre a bit in the hot seat here as a report has come out from CBC that Conservatives want Jenni Byrne gone. Will Poilievre keep her in the party? Will he let her go? We got a rare moment here. We have a CBC panel that's quite interesting. This is anchored by James Morris, strong Conservative voice, among some other panelists here with some interesting takes on this whole situation. Let's jump into this. Got some interesting developments here. Mark Carney unable to find permanent chief of staff after courting high-profile candidates. So nobody wants the job here. A number of senior Liberals such as Justin Trudeau's former principal secretary, Gerald Butts, veteran ministerial chief of staff, Cyrus reporter, and former United Nations ambassador Marc-Andre Blanchard were approached to take on the job, but they declined according to sources. Mr. Carney has since decided to keep Mr. Mendicino in as interim chief of staff until the end of June parliamentary season as the search continues for someone with the breadth of experience to handle the onerous responsibilities. Marco's just getting used here until Carney can find his replacement. So we also have this on CBC. It says Carney's heavily scrutinized chief of staff to remain in role for now. So as is mentioned, he'll be staying on until the end of the June session. Got this one from CBC. It says pressure mounting on Poilievre to fire Jenni Byrne. Sources say caucus will lose patience if campaign manager stays. Now one must ask, is CBC lying because they're the CBC? I can confirm I'm in contact with multiple Conservatives, former and current MPs. They have confirmed to me that they do not like Jenni Byrne's approach. They don't like how she just keeps everything so strapped down that local MPs can't go on a local radio station and explain what they're going to do, how they're going to make the community better, how they're going to fight for Canadians. They weren't allowed to do anything on that. There's a complete media lockdown, and a lot of Conservative MPs, former or current, don't like her approach and don't want her in this position anymore. I mean, if you look at the track record, she was in charge of Stephen Harper's campaign that he lost to Justin Trudeau, and now in charge of Poilievre's campaign that he lost to Mark Carney. Maybe it's time for her to move on. And I don't know if there's a weird situation here because Poilievre used to date her like 15, 20 years ago. Is there a connection there that maybe makes it harder to fire someone? But in my opinion, I think she's got to go. Poilievre needs to come out as more of himself. He needs someone who's not constraining him. Let Poilievre be the attack dog. Let Poilievre show people that he's the family man, the guy that loves his wife. He didn't get to show himself in those areas that would really draw on the female voters. More time with his kids, showing those softer sides, and just showing him being tough, showing him fighting for Canada. It was a little too buttoned up, not to mention suppressing other Conservatives, not being able to speak. It just didn't work out. While we did get more votes, we still lost the election. So with that, they talked about this on CBC today.
What did the Conservatives that you spoke with tell you?
They basically blame Jenni Byrne for the defeat in the last election, failing to adapt to the situation with Justin Trudeau leaving, Donald Trump arriving on the scene, and failing to grasp the change in the mood of the electorate when they did not change their platform, when they did not change their message. And also her critics say that Jenni Byrne brings the worst out of Pierre Poilievre, out of his character, out of his negativity. For her, everything is a battle, I've been told. If you don't win, you lose. And it brings out the negative tone of Pierre Poilievre that seems to be rubbing electors the wrong way. So some Conservatives say we need a change around Pierre Poilievre, around his inner circle, and it starts with Jenni Byrne.
So I've not heard those statements, bringing out the worst in him. There's another statement somewhere, I don't know if this is in that article, but bringing out the worst in Stephen Harper as well. I've not heard that. Obviously, I'm not an insider. I don't know the ins and outs of what's going on there. I just have Conservatives telling me that they're quite frustrated with Jenni Byrne's approach.
If she stays, I've been told, caucus will lose patience. It will be more difficult to support Pierre if there's a confidence vote in caucus. And it's either Pierre who shows Jenni's the door, or caucus will be ready to show Pierre the door. She's a polarizing figure in Conservative circles, and right now she is wearing the sting of the defeat.
She always has been, as has he, frankly. And as a team, they've been polarizing. But it's clear that not all Conservatives feel that way. What is the sort of the defense for keeping her on?
Well, they say we accomplished a lot. We won a lot of blue-collar riding in Labour riding. We've got a lot of cultural vote in the 905 area around Toronto. The strategy worked. We've got the best seat count since Stephen Harper, the best popular vote since Brian Mulroney. it worked. The difference, the detractors will say, is that Brian Mulroney and Stephen Harper formed government. Pierre Poilievre did not. So critics.
The main problem was the approach of Donald Trump. If that approach was different, maybe there wasn't a winning approach. We don't know, but that approach did not work and it tanked badly. Having Poilievre come out on the same kind of page as Mark Carney, but not being first with it, counter tariffs, that whole thing. Maybe it would have been better for Poilievre to call up Donald Trump, go down there and talk with him and make out a preemptive deal and show that he's already got this in the bag. Canadians just need to vote for him. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I just know conservatives telling me they weren't allowed to go on radio stations. They couldn't talk to newspapers. There was a bunch of low-hanging fruit from their competitors that they could have easily attacked and exposed, and they would have lost votes over it, but they weren't allowed to fight for their own community, and that needs to change. And that comes down to Jenni Byrne's approach, and I don't think that works. You have to trust your local candidates to fight for their own communities.
Are not swayed by this argument. And also they seemed willing, though the critics seemed willing, though, for a while to wait until after the summer. Let Pierre reflect on the defeat, on what changes he needs to bring. Let him get elected in a by-election in Alberta that's coming up. And if there's no change in the fall, pressure would have resumed. But now, with talks of possibly having a convention for the Conservative Party earlier this fall instead of next spring, seems to change a little bit the mind of people. They feel that if there's a confidence vote by all the members in the base at this convention, it might short-circuit a possible confidence vote inside the caucus brought by the Chung Reform Act. And so they feel that it might influence the decision. So now I think it did influence the decisions of critics to come forward as this time, and now they say the ball is in the camp of Pierre Poilievre.
James, if I may start with you, you've worked with Jenni Byrne. What do you make of the criticism, the support, and this story emerging from caucus?
I first met Jenni Byrne back, I believe, in 1996, 1997, Reform Party youth, and I've known her for over 30 years, thereabouts. And so, I have great regard for her and the successes she's had in politics, leading national campaigns, leading leadership campaigns, and all that. I don't doubt the report and the reporting that's been done on this. I wish people would be more, transparent and honest as opposed to whispering to reporters. But look, when you have an election campaign that's disappointing in its outcome in terms of its seat count and in terms of the leader losing his own seat, people want accountability. And they want to make sure that the pathway to victory next time is clearer. And some people think that Jenni should go. I get that. But, I think there's the last part of what was just said there in Christian's report about taking the summer to reflect and think about this. I think that's something that Pierre Poilievre has to do. Jenni's someone of enormous capability. She can raise an army and win leaderships and win national campaigns. And I think, the caucus and the party membership both really want accountability of what went wrong. And it's true that a lot went right. Pierre Poilievre got more votes as a percentage of people who voted in this campaign than any one of the 5 election campaigns that Stephen Harper ran in, and he won 3 of the 5. Now, unfairness is the nature of our system sometimes in terms of the seat count at the end of the day, and people have to be held accountable for that. And, Jenni should have an opportunity to explain, what happened in the campaign, and if she wants to stay on, make that case as well. But caucus members are certainly entitled to ask for accountability and transparency about what happened and what went wrong.
I think just put it to the caucus for a vote. If it's so divided, that's what needs to happen.
Andrew, to that extent, crass political calculations can be pretty brutal in those rooms. And I guess it comes down to, can a leader who, he lost his own seat, does he have the political capital to defend his closest advisor when these kinds of charges come up in caucus?
Caucus dynamics are fascinating, and they obviously vary a little bit from party to party in terms of the history and the personalities that are there. But I think one of the things that's happening here is that there are a lot of members of that caucus who are looking to see whether this becomes emblematic of Poilievre understanding he needs to change. This is not just blaming it on Jenni Byrne. If she leaves, everything's fine. Obviously, part of this is to try to put things back together with the Ford, the Doug Ford side of the party. I think it'll be interesting to hear what was made of Jamil Jivani being left out of the caucus assignments.
Jamil Jivani, who wasn't named as part of the shadow cabinet, but he has come out and said he's calling for an end to the temporary foreign workers program. So coming out bold here. I don't know what the reasoning is, why Poilievre didn't make him a part of the shadow cabinet. Jamil Jivani calling it a cheap labor program that takes Canadian jobs and suppresses wages. That is correct. That's exactly why the Liberals brought it in. They have rich donors, big companies who wanted the cheap labor labor. They brought him in, helped him out, and hurt Canadian families with young 15, 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kids who can't get jobs anymore. And just to go to the source here, this is right on Jamil Javani's own website here. End the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. Got a bit of stats here and a petition to sign.
But there are a lot of pieces that I think people are looking at to go, did Poilievre actually get it? Did he actually understand that this, compressing of opinion into a very, very narrow straitjacket of views and messaging didn't end up resonating? And is he prepared and is he capable of changing that? That's what we'll have to see over the next few weeks.
One thing I'd bring up is Pierre Poilievre was one of the first politicians to really embrace YouTube and social media. He blew up on there, the whole Apple moment, and everyone else started coming in because he was dominating on social media. When it came to the campaign, it just seemed like he was being restricted, very sheltered from going on social media, the thing that really blew him up into the public's eye. I mentioned it multiple times. He needed to go on TikTok accounts. He needed to find young 18, 19, 20, 25-year-old, 30-year-old TikTokers in Canada that had nothing to do with politics and just go do a simple 10-second, 1-minute, 3-minute TikTok video with these people and get that youth vote. This is what Donald Trump did. Barron Trump, Donald Trump's son, who was 19, I believe at the time, told him to go on all these different podcasts, and he got so much youth vote from that. Poilievre just needed to copy the same playbook. I don't know why Jenni Byrne would not just look at that and say, how did he win? What should we do? And just mimic it in Canada. They quite literally did the opposite. They did not go do any of that stuff that got them that vote that Barron Trump suggested. Not only that, there could have been so many other podcasts he could have gone on, or shows or interviews, non-political podcasts in Canada, and not just Pierre, but all the local candidates should have been doing these things and say, hey, we're going to set up zones that already have permits to make new projects easy. We're going to build prosperity, like have all their campaign media. And if some candidates aren't super comfortable doing that, that's fine. But the ones who want to get out and go on local media, let them go do that. The fact that Jenni Byrne wanted to control the voice so much, we lost. The approach has to change. I think she's lost twice in a row. I think it's time for a change personally, but I mean, I don't call the shots. That's my opinion.
This is about caucus management. This is about how as they start to frame up towards a leadership fight, seeing whether or not Pierre Poilievre can pivot and become the kind of leader that they think is necessary to take them forward.
Well, and Shachi, it does kind of feel like a proxy fight. They're saying it's about Jenni, but it's really about whether Pierre has the power in this moment to defend her and push on through. I mean, you crunch the numbers, 143 seats, 41% of the vote.
Yeah.
Normally, that would be enough to defend her and then some.
Normally, but I think in this particular case, there are a lot of caucus members who listen to that narrative and listen to that argument and say, stop gaslighting us, because of the gap between expectation. You go back to the beginning of the year, end of last year, the party was leading the Liberals by 25 to 30 percentage points in public opinion polling. So how much of Pierre Poilievre is there without Jenni Byrne and vice versa? Pierre Poilievre right now has the political capital to continue on as leader, to make the case to his caucus that he should stay. But it may be a tougher sell, especially with someone as polarizing as Byrne. She's a verb in Canadian politics. There are would-be conservative politicians out there who have been Jenni Byrned by Jenni Byrne. and I mean, I don't even mean to sound funny. It's true. And so in that situation,
I mean, if you watch YouTube here, Wyatt Claypool is one of those people. The way that things are being conducted there, it's time for a change.
It's a much tougher sell to keep her on and to keep caucus on side, I think.
Stevie, how you lose battles in politics sometimes matters more than how you win the ones you win. Is there risk of escalation here that if Poilievre digs in and tries to support her and ends up losing, that can eat into your credibility pretty badly too?
Absolutely. I think they have to consider, is it worth fighting for Jenni Byrne? Is that the hill he's going to want to die on? Totally taking a bit of a sidetrack. It's kind of like the carbon
right.
tax. Something is not working or it's divisive. Even if you believe in it, sometimes you have to let it go. Mm-hmm. And I think in this case, there's something there. Yeah. So I think he's going to have to balance all that out. I mean, I'd be happy to take on, if they kept her on and have another election against a Poilievre, Jenni Byrne duo in maybe 2028, because I think that they were not able to pivot and that they met the moment and they had the tone in 2024. And I'm not sure they'll be able to adjust to whatever the world looks like in 2028.
2028? Mark Carney doesn't have a majority mandate. It could be election in 2026.
Mid-game adjustment was clearly the issue, but Christian raised the possibility of an early convention to kind of deal with the mandatory leadership issues, James. Conservative members They vote after every election. Can the Conservatives afford a fourth leadership debate in a decade here?
Well, whether the convention's in the fall or whether it's in the spring, it actually kind of doesn't matter because the members of the party, the riding presidents, the former members of parliament who are unsuccessful, the candidates who are not successful, they're all going to converge and they're going to come together and they're going to want accountability because to run for office is a big deal. You put your name on, you put your name out there in public. You face incredible scrutiny online. It can be torturous for your family and all that. But you do it because you want to contribute to your country and you want to live a life of purpose and do something meaningful. And when you lose, it's really disappointing. It can be really hurtful. And if you lose and you think it's because of something that happened over there and you did everything right in your riding, you want people to be held accountable for that. So whether it's in the spring or whether it's this coming fall, I don't really think it matters because accountability will be demanded and expected, and the leader has to deliver that.
Andrew, in the absence of Pierre Poilievre in the House, we've seen the rise of your fellow Saskatchewanian Andrew Scheer. It's been interesting to see him return a little bit to the spotlight. What sort of tone do you think he's going to represent in the House?
It's interesting to see him because in some ways this shows that they are, in fact, the Conservative caucus at least, still rallying around that kind of Reform Party persona that they have. That they are not, in fact, wanting to move to something more mainstream, more Doug Fordish. They are wanting to very much stay with that kind of Western approach. It'll be also, I think, interesting when we see what happens as Pierre Poilievre becomes a Westerner again. Once he's representing a seat in the deep rural areas of Alberta, that is, from everything we can see, and certainly I have relatives who live out there that I know about the area, that this is, this is really very kind of a true Tory area. And I think a lot of folks who are going to be looking for him to take a stand, much more like Danielle Smith in that riding, than perhaps what Canadians in other parts of the country are looking for. So it's possible that this ends up all working against Pierre Poilievre. That what he needs to do to retain the leadership, what he thinks he's doing there, may be successful, but it may in fact lead to them being locked into a position where they simply cannot win an election.
Chachi, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, but I'd like your take on the Conservative critics list, the shadow cabinet. It's a very long list of people. Jamil Jivani was left off it. I wonder what you made of that.
So the reason why it's long is because there's more people to scrutinize Mark Carney's government. It doesn't cost anything extra. It doesn't cost taxpayers. They don't get paid any extra. There's basically about double the amount of shadow cabinet ministers to Mark Carney's cabinet. It's a good thing.
Well, I mean, you start with the length of that list, and ultimately it gives a whole lot of caucus members a remit, an assignment, something to do so that they're perhaps less likely to be doing other things off their own bat, which might include conspiring against the leadership of Pierre Poilievre.
The party is rallying around Pierre Poilievre. People simply didn't like that Jenni Byrne was restricting their ability to openly go and meet with media and defend themselves when they were being attacked by other leaders in the community. Leaders of the NDP or the Liberals or the Green Party, they weren't allowed to actually defend themselves. That is the problem. So the problem is not Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre is going to remain the leader. He is the leader of the party. But what Pierre decides to do with Jenni Byrne, though, that's the question. Interesting
that Jamil Jivani was left off of that list, almost the counterbalance to the fact that Andrew Scheer is in there as party leader in the House. So on one hand, as Andrew points out, a nod to the conservative, those right conservative roots that the party isn't quite prepared to stray from. On the other hand, I think a note that, hey, we'd maybe not like to be sworn enemies with Doug Ford and the Ontario Conservatives and Ontario Conservative voters, and maybe unforced errors are not what we want to focus on at the moment. So what it does is it, I think, takes some of the temperature down, which was a significant signal and piece of feedback from Canadian voters, which is that they were prepared to look very hard at the Conservative Party. They were prepared to give them an almost mandate, but it was a lot of the tone, a lot of the messaging, and a lot of the flintiness that ultimately turned the electorate off. We know.
No, it's a slander on Facebook. That's why. There's a lot of groups pushing propaganda that wasn't true about Pierre Poilievre. Next election, that can't be allowed to stand, period. Because if people actually knew what Mark Carney and the Liberals were up to, they wouldn't vote for them. The majority of them would not vote for them. Canadians just were not educated in what was going on in their system, in our government. They saw a couple of videos, they saw a couple of clips, they saw stuff being shared on Facebook. What? Poilievre's going to take away our healthcare? He's going to privatize it? Oh my God, he's going to take away women's rights? I guess I'll vote for Mark Carney because this infographic that just popped up on my screen tells me to. What we've learned from this is that Canadians are very easily duped, very easily manipulated, sadly. We need our population to wake up and think for themselves, because clearly, if people knew all the facts, they had all the information, everything Mark Carney's involved with, Brookfield, his stock options, connections to Elon Musk and Donald Trump and everything else going on down there, Brookfield, the net zero agenda, people would not be okay with that. They wouldn't be okay with him dodging $5.3 billion of taxes through Brookfield, moving the pension funds down to Bermuda and Cayman Islands, getting minimal returns, but yet charging $1 billion in fees that Brookfield is making off of Ontario and other pension plans. It's all not cool, but people just don't know the stuff's happening.
When Jamil Jivani came out slugging at Premier Ford the night of the election, it's all anybody could talk about. And I know a lot of conservatives that were really enthused to see somebody pushing back. Does freezing him out come with consequences?
I think Sachi said, and I think the Jenni Byrne discussion really is one about relationships. I think that her inability to connect with some people, the toxic way in which she manages some of her relationships really harmed the campaign, especially in Ontario, and especially the bad feelings between Jenni and the Ford government. And that may have been a deciding factor on who formed government federally at the end of the day. And one other thing I think to raise, kind of counter to that, I wonder how much of this, is it easier to hate on a woman a little bit in a campaign manager role?
Probably.
Is there an element of that we're and I'm no defender of Jenni Byrne at all, but I do wonder, the feminist in me has to raise that, I wonder if we'd be having the same conversation if she was James Byrne.
Fair.
Wow, that's quite the statement. That's something else. I can't believe she just said that on live TV. But somehow they're pushing back on Jenni Byrne because she's a woman, not a man. Are you kidding me? It's a track record. She was the campaign manager for Stephen Harper, lost the election. Justin Trudeau came in for his reign of terror, 9 years. Mark Carney comes in. She loses the next one. Pierre Poilievre with this big polling advantage. Then Donald Trump comes in, shakes everything up. They don't pivot. They're not doing the social media. Pierre loses. It's close, but he loses to Mark Carney. People want accountability. It's not because she's a woman. That's absolutely absurd. This lady is absolutely absurd. Would we expect any less, though, considering she's the former chief of staff for the Liberal Party? These people are all the same. Just radical, insane, non-logical, nonsensical people.
Relationship, tone, messaging to the public. How important is that going to be heading into this parliamentary session?
Well, I mean, Key, just by the way, about Jamil Jivani, he will not be silenced.
No.
He didn't run for office. He didn't run for office to not fight for things. And he's an impressive intellect. He was the former head of the Manning Center, and he likes to talk about a lot of issues, and he speaks forcefully and aggressively. And the shadow cabinet list or shadow ministers were announced, but it doesn't mean that he won't have some other assignment and he won't make some other contribution either to committee or in some other way. So Jamil didn't run for office to not make noise and not try to make a difference in his own way. But look, the party has to really sort of decompress from the expectations to the reality of April 28th, going into this sort of sprint session of Parliament that'll break just before Canada Day at the end of June, and then go into the summer and then really think about who they are, what they are, and where they want to be. And I think Andrew made the point that 2028, 2029 is 50 lifetimes in politics from now. So who knows what the issues are going to be? The NDP will have a different leader. They'll be re-energized. Who knows if Donald Trump will still be president of the United States? Unlikely so on the ballot. Mark Carney will have accumulated some, a record that'll cause some opportunity for distinction between him and the conservative alternative to govern. So if any one of those three things that I said are true, and I think all three of them will be true, then the electoral outcome next time could be dramatically different without the Conservatives getting that much more support. The question is, does Pierre hold on to his 41%? Does he earn the right to govern Canada by showing that he can govern the Conservative caucus and govern the Conservative Party effectively? People don't trust you to govern the country if you don't demonstrate that you can govern the party and the caucus really well. So that's his first test. Stephen Harper faced the same thing when he was unsuccessful after 2004. He showed leadership, rallied the party together, went into 2006 and won. So that's Pierre's challenge. And, Jenni Byrne today is the story, but it'll be an ongoing challenge until he re-cements his leadership at a party vote and then moves forward from there.
That's just it. The leader has to decide here. Pierre Poilievre's got to decide what happens with Jenni Byrne. He has a respect to the caucus, but the caucus does want to see some changes, whether that's her changing her tactics, not locking things down so much, or switching it out for someone else who has a much more open approach that will let all the Conservative MPs defend themselves in their own communities, doing more social media or any other media that gets the Conservative message out there to combat all the filth and misinformation that gets pushed about Pierre Poilievre by the left on places like Facebook, because it just makes no sense to lose an election when people don't even know what one of the candidates is running on, when it's all misinformation.